Hello everyone. Welcome to our channel, Movie Recap. Today we are going to explain a feel-good movie from 2006 titled, The Pursuit of Happyness. Get ready to witness the inspiring tale of a man's arduous journey, from homelessness to millionaire. Spoiler ahead, watch out. The movie begins in San Francisco in 1981. Chris Gardner, the movie's main character, makes a living by selling medical equipment. He takes his son off at daycare every day and travels to different hospitals to market his medical equipment. Chris has to sell at least one device for a month. Yet, this equipment is seen unnecessary and expensive by the hospitals. Unable to balance work and caring for their son, Chris asks his wife Linda to take over their son's daycare duties, but she is busy with her job. They argue, and Linda leaves for work again. That evening, Chris solves a Rubik's Cube, showcasing his problem-solving skills. The next day, while crossing the street, Chris encounters a successful businessman driving a fancy car. They chat, and Chris learns that the man is a stockbroker. Chris believes a college education is required for such a job, but the man emphasizes the importance of math and social skills instead. Chris wonders why he isn't as happy as the people around him. The next morning, Chris tells Linda he wants to apply for a stockbroker job, but she's upset because they're low on rent. Chris heads to a brokerage firm and gives his medical device to a street performer so he doesn't have to carry it. He calls this decision stupid. While applying for the job, Chris notices the performer running off with the device behind the boss. Chris quickly leaves, holding his application, but the performer escapes. The next day, Chris assures Linda he will sell the device to be done with it. He then brings his son Christopher to the daycare. Chris says that the word happiness doesn't have a Y in it, contrary to what is painted on the daycare walls to his son. Later, on the street, Chris spots the street performers and starts chasing them, claiming he invested all his savings in the device. Eventually, he catches them and retrieves his device. However, Chris now has two devices, contradicting his earlier promise. Linda is unhappy seeing the additional device. Later that day, Chris gives their son a basketball for his birthday and tries to talk to Linda about the incident, but she refuses to listen. In the next scene, Chris spots Jay trying to hail a cab. He reminds Jay about the application he submitted a month ago, but Jay is in a hurry. Seizing the opportunity, Chris gets into the same taxi, claiming they're going in the same direction. Inside the cab, Chris talks about his qualifications while Jay attempts to solve a Rubik's Cube. When Chris sees it, he solves the Rubik's Cube quickly. Impressed, Jay exits the taxi without paying, leaving Chris unable to pay as well. He immediately flees the taxi and takes the train to safety, but he misses his device as he boards the train. Then Chris calls Linda to apologize for being late, but she angrily tells him that she and Christopher are leaving the house. Chris rushes to their home, only to see them leaving. At that moment, he receives a call from Jay, who asks him to write down his secretary's phone number. However, Chris doesn't have pen and paper. He writes down the number at a neighboring store after swiftly memorizing it. Chris confronts Linda the following day after she has just dropped off their son at the daycare. He permits Linda to leave after she expresses that she is no longer content, but he also takes his son along. Later that night, their landlord demands they either leave or pay the rent. Chris negotiates a 10-day extension but is asked to paint the rooms himself. The following day, while painting the house, Chris is mistakenly arrested for unpaid parking tickets. He asks Linda to take care of their son while he is in jail. Upon his release, Chris rushes to an interview in his dirty clothes. Although the interview panel is disappointed, Chris tells the truth and manages to make them laugh. He successfully completes the interview and returns home, waiting for Linda and Christopher. When they arrive, Linda informs Chris that she is leaving for New York. Chris asks to keep Christopher with him, and Linda agrees before leaving. With the help of his friend, Chris finds a nearby motel and enjoys playing basketball with his son. They also visit a hospital and manage to sell the equipment, earning some money. The next day, Chris goes to his internship to learn about the trade. During the break, he meets his boss, Froome, and they have a conversation. While talking, Chris notices someone carrying his medical device and starts chasing him. Unfortunately, Chris gets hit by a car and loses one of his shoes in the process. He returns to work wearing only one shoe and realizes that he's given orders for every little task. In the following scene, Chris fails to achieve his goal. Chris had a list of CEOs to talk about the task. One of a CEO on his target list is called for a meeting, but Farkash, his internship supervisor, asks Chris to park his car, causing him to be late and miss the meeting. That night, Chris calls his son to plan a trip for the next day. The following day, Chris visits the CEO at his home and apologizes for missing the meeting. Upon learning that Chris and his son are going to a football game, the CEO invites them to join him. Chris seizes the opportunity. As the football game progresses, the CEO reveals that he is not ready to accept Chris's offer, but he introduces Chris to his friends. As things seem to be going well, Chris faces another setback when the IRS deducts money from his account to cover unpaid taxes, leaving him frustrated. However, amidst his struggles, he finds his lost device but discovers that it is broken. Determined, Chris takes it to multiple hospitals in hopes of selling it, and one hospital agrees to purchase it once it's fixed. Returning to the motel, Chris and his son find the lock changed and their belongings thrown out. With no other options, they gather their things and make their way to the train station. They spend the night in the station restroom, with Chris silently sobbing due to the overwhelming stress. In the subsequent scenes, Chris and Christopher visit various homeless shelters until they finally find one to stay in. After finding a homeless shelter, Chris attempts to repair the device. Chris quickly also learned the importance of wrapping up client conversations because they must be early for the homeless shelter line. In the next scene, Chris and Christopher attend a mass at the homeless shelter, and afterwards, Chris prepares for his internship exams. The following day, he successfully completes the exam quickly. As he's leaving, Mr. Froome asks Chris to lend him money for a taxi. Despite having limited funds, Chris lends him $5. To earn more money, Chris donates blood and uses the funds to buy a part for the device he is fixing. Back at the homeless shelter, Christopher asks Chris if Linda left them because of him. Chris reassures that Christopher has nothing to do with her leaving them. Chris then fixes the device after Christopher compliments him on being a wonderful father. The next day, Chris successfully sells the device, but they only have enough money for one night at a hotel. Seeking a moment of respite, they head to the beach. In the office restroom, Jay congratulates Chris on his impressive client list during the internship, acknowledging his hard work and achievements. Shortly after, Mr. Farkash contacts Chris and directs him to meet with Mr. Froome. Chris is wearing a new shirt. Mr. Froome notices it and asks why. Because it is his last day as an intern, Chris tells him. To Chris's surprise, Mr. Froome responds by expressing his wish for Chris to wear the shirt again tomorrow, informing him that he has been offered a full-time job. Overwhelmed with gratitude and emotions, Chris struggles to hold back tears as he extends his heartfelt thanks to the panel. In a kind gesture, Mr. Froome even returns the $5 he had borrowed from Chris earlier. As Chris exits the building, he narrates that this part of his life is called happiness, savoring the joy and fulfillment he feels. He eagerly heads to his son's daycare and embraces him with pure joy and love. The film concludes with Chris and his son strolling around, sharing light-hearted jokes and laughter as they encounter the real Chris Gardner, an inspiring reminder of the journey they have overcome. An uplifting epilogue unveils Chris's remarkable success in securing a multi-million-dollar deal, solidifying his triumph and bringing the story to a satisfying close. Thank you for watching. Do like, comment, share, subscribe and hit the bell icon.